Well, Dinesh certainly doesn't need a traditional introduction, and so instead I've got a cute story for you and then a special surprise. The cute story, as Joel just mentioned, in December we'll have Nick Adams. Nick was supposed to be here in July as our speaker, but he wasn't. He wasn't because he was detained by U.S. immigration of coming into the country. Nick is also a very vocal, outspoken person against the Obama regime, and guess what happened to him? So that's just one example, and this is so timely to see the effect of our current speaker, our speaker tonight, because as poor Nick called me frantically in, I think in the early part of May, says, "Erica, I can't come. I've been Dineshed." Good. So Dinesh has become a verb in addition to everything else. And now for the big surprise. For those of you who have seen Hillary's America, and you're the kind of person that likes to look at movie credits at the end, you'd see a name that comes up over and over again, because this person was, along with Dinesh, the co-writer, co-director, co-producer of Hillary's America, and his name is Bruce Schooley. Well, Bruce is somewhat local. He's a friend of mine, and tonight he's here at the Conservative Forum at Silicon Valley. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for the producer, co-producer, director, and writer of Hillary's America, Mr. Bruce Schooley.
I'm sure all of you have been aware of the fact that last month it was announced that then Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton thought it would be a good idea to drone WikiLeaks Julian Assange. This is absolutely outrageous. She should not drone Julian Assange. She should drone Dinesh D'Souza. The top 10 reasons why Hillary Rodham Clinton should drone Dinesh D'Souza. Number 10, Dinesh has been raising holy hell on liberalism for 30 years. Number 9, he is so deplorable he deserves his own basket. Number 8, he might not be a needy Latino, but he is definitely an irredeemable Indian. He worked in the Reagan White House and right here at Stanford's Hoover Institute. May God rest his soul. In 1,000 speeches, he has violated the hallowed halls of leftist orthodoxy, desecrating Berkeley, Yale, Stanford, and Harvard. In 100 debates, he has humiliated the patron saints of liberalism, including Bill Ayers, Jesse Jackson, and Ward Churchill. With 2 million very, very engaged Facebook friends, he doesn't even need to suck up to the media and liberal press. In 6 New York, is it 6 or 7? What, how many? You don't know? You always have to ask him, you know. It changes monthly. In 6 New York Times bestsellers, he has been popping off about American exceptionalism for 30 years. And in just 4 years, which is amazing when you think about it, 4 years, he has created 3 of the top 10 political documentaries of all time, including 2016, Obama's America. Now, Obama didn't really like Obama's America very much. So he threw Dinesh the Menace into the slammer. Now, Dinesh could have pulled back. I mean, this would be understandable, right? I mean, you get thrown in jail. You're a political prisoner. You could have pulled out back and taken a little heat off you. No. What does he do in jail with all that free time? He writes Hillary's America, The Secret Life of the Democratic Party, which is the #1 reason Hillary Clinton should drone Dinesh D'Souza. Ladies and gentlemen, Dinesh D'Souza.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess I don't really need the podium since I remember to wear pants. I am very honored and thrilled to be here. This is a great crowd, and boy, this is an important time for our country. I want to thank the Silicon Valley Forum for inviting me, and I want to thank you all for being here. I was 17 years old when I first saw America. I had boarded a plane in Mumbai, India, to come to the United States for a year as an exchange student. And I remember the airplane descending on New York City. I remember looking out the window. I saw the skyline of New York, and I saw the Statue of Liberty. And I remember a kind of a strange feeling came over me, which is I realized that my life would be completely different from that moment going forward. I felt that I was moving from the margin of the world to the center. And I recognized, however, indistinctly, that I was coming to a country where if I stayed, I would be able to be the architect of my own destiny. This to me is the core of American exceptionalism. It's not just that the immigrant comes here to find opportunity, to find success, to find economic betterment. All of that is true. But most of all, what's true is that this is a country where we get to write the script of our own life. This is a country where our destiny isn't given to us as much as it is constructed by us. This is a country where you are in the driver's seat of your own future. So this is the American dream. This is the pursuit of happiness. And notice that no other country has a dream. There's no Chinese dream. There's no Asian Indian dream. This is the core of American exceptionalism. And it is the basis of my patriotism. The philosopher Edmund Burke says to love our country should be lovely. And America is lovely because of the kind of life that it makes possible for us. Now, fast forward about 30 years, and I find myself standing in a New York courtroom and hearing a bailiff bark out the phrase, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And as an immigrant, I got to tell you, that sends a chill down your spine. I was being indicted for a heinous crime, namely exceeding the campaign finance limit. I had given $20,000 to a college friend of mine who was running for the U.S. Senate in New York, and this was over the limit, the $10,000 limit of the campaign finance law. Now, interestingly, no American has ever been locked up for doing what I did. But a judge in New York sentenced me to 8 months of incarceration overnight in a confinement center on the Mexican border. And also I got mandatory psychiatric counseling, which was evidently aimed at some kind of rehabilitation or re-education. Now, interestingly, right about the time that my case was going through the court, another guy, this is a fellow named Sant Chatwal, Asian Indian guy. We Asian Indians appear to specialize in the campaign finance violations area. Well, anyway, this guy gave $180,000 in straw donations to Hillary Clinton and a whole group of Democrats. He was also guilty of witness tampering, and he openly boasted of corruption. He goes before a New York judge, no prison, no confinement, no mandatory psychiatric counseling. Now, I say this because justice is not merely a matter of did you break the law. It's also a matter of does the penalty fit the crime. Do other guys who did roughly the same thing or worse get roughly the same penalty? So the point I want to make is that progressive justice is a kind of an oxymoron. It's kind of a sham. And nevertheless, I got this sentence, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I thought, okay, here we go. And so I showed up at this confinement center, which I kind of imagined to be sort of a white-collar prison facility. And I had heard that those places are not that bad. You basically meet mayors, doctors who defrauded Medicare. I was told you can bring your chessboard and they have an activities director, and the food is not so bad. But it turns out that the confinement centers aren't like that. This is for people who have served their time in prison, and they can be hardened criminals, but right before they're let out on the street, they'll spend 60 days or 90 days in a confinement center. So here I am in this facility, 120 people sleeping in bunk beds in a room, well, about the size of this one, and it's the whole gamut of hoodlums. Armed robbers, coyotes, drug smugglers, attempted murderers, the whole range. The majority were Hispanic, since this was the southern part of California. There was a sprinkling of whites, a sprinkling of blacks. Everybody was in some kind of group or gang. I thought to myself, wow, this is a little bit dicey because I can't really talk to this guy because that guy might want to kill me. So initially I was very much to myself, kind of a hermit. I did contemplate starting my own gang, the Asian Indian gang. Well, after a while I said to myself, look, I'm actually a conservative in a very unusual place where conservatives rarely go. I mean, I'm not going to walk down the hall of the confinement center and run into George Will or Charles Krauthammer. So I decided to take this lemon and kind of convert it into lemonade by talking to these guys, reading their case files. I wanted to learn the ideology of the criminal underclass. My previous exposure to this subject was kind of limited to a viewing of the Shawshank Redemption, in which I had the idea that criminals all think that they are innocent. They didn't do it. The system screwed them over. But once I got to know these guys over some months, I realized that their point of view is actually a little different and more interesting. Their view is, look, we did it. We're guilty. But we are the small fry. We are actually the stupid criminals. Because we got caught. That's why we're here. The big fry never get caught. The big fry are at large. The big fry are not even pursued by the system because they run the system. And this got me thinking in a little bit of a new light. I would lie in my bunk bed at night and I would hear these guys talk. Rough people, they speak in a rough way, and I realized that they talk about only 4 things: food, money, sleep, and sex. That's it. They live at the very elemental level. But I realized that they have a certain, you might say, low view of human nature. And I realized that I might actually have something to learn from them, which is to say that I had been thinking about American politics in completely the wrong way for 25 years. Because I'm a product of the think tanks and the Reagan administration and the National Review, and I sort of had this idea that American politics is an argument between two sides. that believe different things and have different ideals. And we believe in this and they believe in that. And we stand for liberty and they stand for social justice. And we want equality of rights and they want equality of outcomes. But I began to wonder and think that from the point of view of this criminal underclass, this whole way of thinking about politics is complete and total bullshit. Why? Because human nature is not motivated by debate. Human nature is, in fact, motivated by acquisitiveness and greed and lust and hatred and envy and revenge. And if these are the actual motives that drive human beings, how can they be exempt from politics? We always think about politics in terms of what people say. But it's somewhat more interesting to look at politics in terms of what people want. What's in it for them? And that's what I want to do this evening, is go underneath the political rhetoric and actually talk about what I think is really going on in American politics. And then I want to pivot to what we can do about it. I don't mean in the general nonsensical rah-rah sense of we're going to win, we're going to do this, none of that. What can we actually do to move the needle and make a difference right here and specifically? Now, in American politics, I think that there is a kind of secret war that is going on under the surface between two very powerful groups of people. On the one side, there are the wealth creators. The wealth creators are the people who create wealth. And that's been really the strength and genius of America, to create wealth. And this wealth is the basis of our power as a country. America is powerful around the world because we have a powerful economy here at home. And wealth creation is a very strange thing. It's not actually obvious how you create wealth. When I was a kid, I'd go to school, I'd have 10 marbles in my pocket, and I'd like to come home with more marbles. But I also realized that I didn't know how to make marbles. The only way for me to come home with 20 marbles was to take some other guy's marbles. So normally that's how wealth is acquired, through conquest, through confiscation. But America figured out a way to create wealth. And great rewards go to the people who create wealth. And the greatest rewards go to people who create wealth that is not even asked for, that isn't even demanded. In other words, supply without demand. Think of something like the iPhone. There wasn't a demand for it. People didn't write Bill Gates and go, gee, let's have a phone that does this and downloads that, has apps. No, he thought of it, he built it, he marketed it before you knew you couldn't live without it. The supply preceded and anticipated the demand. Wealth creation. Now, on the other side are a group of people who have their eyes on this same wealth. But they're not wealth creators. In fact, they have no idea how to create wealth. Think of a guy like Obama. That guy, I mean, can Obama make an iPhone? The poor guy can't even put up a website. From the point of view of technological capitalism, he's a complete zero. Hillary's the same. Bernie, Rip Van Winkle, just woke up from the 20-year nap, sleeping on his neighbor's couch. Doesn't even know really what day it is. Now, we shouldn't think of these people as socialists. They are way too lazy to be socialists. Socialists want the government to nationalize industries. They want the government to do what industries normally do. Let the government nationalize the oil industry and go to Midland, Texas and drill the oil Can you see Bernie going into the ground and drilling for oil? Or Hillary? No. They want the people in Midland, Texas to go get the oil. You do it. You get the oil out, you put it into drums, you label it, and once you've created the wealth, we will march in and take it over. We'll tell you what to do with it. In short, what we're witnessing is a struggle for the control of the wealth of America. And what the progressives want to do in the name of progress is quite simply to steal America. To steal America. Now, when I say steal America, I don't mean that they want to steal the $3 trillion of money that comes in annually in taxation. I don't mean that they merely want to control the gross domestic product of 18 or 19 trillion dollars that the country creates annually. I mean that they want to control the whole wealth of America, all of it, which is all the land and all the buildings and all the companies and all the money in your retirement fund and your kids' college fund and your couch and your big screen TV. If you add all that up, it's about $75 trillion. It's one big pile of dough. And the thieves of America are very interested in that. Now, how do they go about trying to get it? Some people think that the way they do this is purely by dividing the country into the makers and the takers, and by making sure that the takers outnumber the makers. And there are many Americans who fear that we have reached the point where the one outnumbers the other. But this actually misses the cleverest aspect of the progressive strategy, which is that the progressives actually know that this is not true. The takers do not outnumber the makers, and they can't win on that basis alone. There's a missing ingredient. There's a missing ingredient that involves convincing many of the makers to vote on the side of the takers. And that is the moral claim to justice, to social justice. Now, it is this moral claim that gives the Democratic Party its sense of superiority, its right to rule. And it's the moral claim that puts our side on the defensive. They're for progress, we're against progress. Now, what they mean by progress is really simple. They mean centralization of power and turning over that power to them. They mean ensconcing themselves in charge of the wealth and power of this country, and that's how they define progress. But the reason that they're able to get away with it is that they claim, and we believe them, that the Democratic Party has always been the party of the good guys, of the little guy, of the outsider, of women, of Latinos, of blacks, the party that fought for emancipation, and the party that secured civil rights under the law. Now, none of this is even remotely true. The Democratic Party, far from being the party of progress, far from being the party of the little guy or the ordinary guy, far from being the party of women, has actually been the deadly enemy of the ordinary man. The Democratic Party, from the 1820s to the 1850s, the Democratic Party threw the American Indians off their land in violation of all kinds of treaties, and then bludgeoned them west in an event that historians call the Trail of Tears. They did that. They were also the party that relentlessly upheld slavery for half a century. Think of it. There were 4 million Americans in bondage at the time of the Civil War. How many of those slaves were owned by Republicans? Answer, 0. Every single one of those slaves in 1860 was owned by the Democrats. Every single one. And now people go, well, wait a minute, Dinesh. I thought the Civil War was between the anti-slavery North and the pro-slavery South. Well, The first fact to note is that most Southerners didn't own slaves. Most Confederates didn't own slaves. The second fact to note is that the Northern Democratic Party, led by Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas, protected slavery with the same ingenuity and zeal as John Calhoun, the leader of the Southern Democrats. The Democratic Party was protecting slavery North and South. So the real slavery debate was not between just the North and the South, it was between the anti-slavery Republican Party and the pro-slavery Democratic Party. Now, after the war, the Democrats realized this is all extremely embarrassing. Let's take all the bad stuff that we did and blame it on the South. And so in an unbelievable sleight of hand, the South gets saddled with the blame for what the Democratic Party actually did. And then after the Civil War, the Democratic Party, which was in shambles, revived itself and became the party of segregation, Jim Crow, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, and lynching. Now, again, people say, well, surely there was a lot of blame to go around. Actually, no. Every segregation law in the South, and there is no exception to this rule, was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, enforced by Democratic sheriffs and city officials. The Democrats' Ku Klux Klan was founded by Nathan Bedford Forrest, a Confederate general who was also a delegate to the DNC. But the Republicans passed a whole bunch of laws that shut down the Klan within 5 years. They were called the Ku Klux Klan Acts of 1871. The Klan disappeared. But it was revived in the early 20th century by none other than the progressive Democrat Woodrow Wilson, who showed a pro-Ku Klux Klan movie in the White House to his cabinet called The Birth of a Nation. It's all about these lustful, crazy blacks, and the hero of the movie is the Ku Klux Klan, which comes riding in on white sheets and basically saves the day. So this led to a massive Klan revival, not only in the South, but in the Midwest and in the West. And according to historian Eric Foner of Columbia, and I quote him now, the Ku Klux Klan was for 30 years the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party, end quote. Now, I could go on like this. I'll just give a single further example. In the 1930s, the Democrats became fascinated by two very interesting phenomena abroad, fascism and Nazism. Now, today we think of fascism as on the right. But you've got to remember that the Nazis called themselves National Socialists. There were three leftist movements in the 20th century: progressivism, communism, and fascism. And they were all competing on the same territory. They all claimed the mantle of the future. Young JFK went to Nazi Germany in the 1930s, and he came back effusive with praise of Hitler. He goes, Hitler is a legend. He goes, there are people who don't like him. Most of them are jealous of him. He said the Nordic people consider themselves superior because they are. Because they are. This is JFK. FDR was enamored not by Hitler but by Mussolini. And he sent members of his brain trust to Italy to study Italian fascism, which he thought was more advanced than the New Deal, to bring those ideas to America. Now, I tell you this because after the war, the progressive historians looked at this and they went, uh-oh, these are the progressive icons of the 20th century. We cannot have young people looking at this stuff. We kind of have to leave it out of the textbooks. And so they did. And so what I'm getting at is that the crimes of the Democratic Party have become camouflaged because they have all very interestingly been blamed on somebody else. Let's blame the South. Let's blame the white man. Let's blame America. And so literally you hear this now. America committed genocide on the American Indian. Well, first of all, if America did all these things, they'd still be going on. Obviously, some Americans did them, and other Americans stopped them. So the Democrats have this unbelievably sordid history of all the stuff that they did. Right away, it seems to me, this creates an opportunity for Trump on Wednesday. Why? Because the Democratic Party has never acknowledged any of its own history. They've never admitted it. They've never taken responsibility for it. They've never apologized for it. And they've never done one penny of restitution for it. So, one small piece of advice from me to Donald Trump for Wednesday: ask Hillary if she will finally and truthfully admit that hers is the party that enslaved, segregated, lynched, and murdered millions of blacks and other minorities. Will she admit it finally and take responsibility for it? Yes or no? Yes or no? Now, let's fast forward a little bit to Obama and Hillary Clinton. My own relationship with Obama has always been somewhat tense. In fact, looking back, I think that my real crime was that I made a movie that really annoyed him. Not just because it was a critique of his policies, but I kind of got into his world. And I interviewed his brother in the Huruma slum of Nairobi. You know, here was Obama prancing around saying, "We are our brother's keeper." And there's his real brother living in a hut in the swamps of Nairobi. And so it made him look really bad. In fact, there was a remarkable incident shortly after my movie came out in which I was just actually, I get a phone call, and I look at my phone, and it's from Kenya. And I'm like, what? So I answer the phone. "Hello, Dinesh, it's George Obama, Obama's brother." And I'm like, "What's going on, George?" And he goes, "Dinesh, you know I have a 1-year-old kid." And I go, "Yeah, I know." And he goes, "Well, he's very sick in the hospital. He needs urgent medical care. Would you be willing to send me $1,000? And I'm like, "George, isn't there someone else you can call?" And he goes, "No. And so, sure enough, I go down to Western Union, I send him $1,000. The point I want to get at is that this whole business, Obama was kind of mad. And people go on social media and go, "Dinesh, you know, what makes you think Obama? He's the president of the United States. What makes you think he cares about your dumb movie, spends any time thinking about you?" And I'm like, well, I wouldn't think so, but a few weeks after the movie came out, vituperative attacks on me by name began to appear on a website called barackobama.com. And although these attacks were unsigned, if you paid attention to them in their unbelievable pomposity, incoherence, one could actually detect the signature of the petty narcissist who currently inhabits the White House. Well, at the end of the day, Obama is an ideologue. Now, his ideology is pathetic. It actually involves the reduction of American wealth and power. Obama wanted that. He has done that. When I first came to America, nothing could happen in the world, anywhere, without America having a big say-so, if not determining the outcome. Today, thanks to Obama, all kinds of stuff goes on in the world, and we have no say-so at all. We're irrelevant to the outcome. And that is not something easy to accomplish, and it is something that has been accomplished by design. This is actually Obama's talent. I mean, he's not really a community organizer, but he is a very skilled resentment organizer. He knows how to tap the deep chords of human discontent. He knows how to point the finger of blame. And he knows how to convince people who are humiliated by their lack of success in a meritocratic society. Look, it's not humiliating not to succeed in a highly stratified society. If you live in an aristocratic society and you are a serf, you don't have a reason to feel too bad about yourself because you were born a serf. It's like you got the short end of the stick. You just had bad luck. But if you are in a society where anyone can learn, anyone can start a business, and then you see all these successful people sitting in nice restaurants and sipping wine and cutting into juicy steaks with limousines pulling in and out, and you think to yourself, wow, why them? Why not me? You cannot avoid the nagging thought that the reason that you're not successful is because you're not as good as they are. You suck. You could have thought of that app, but you didn't. You could have gotten that additional education, but you didn't. So in this state, the community organizer sidles up to you and whispers into your ear, don't feel bad. It's not your fault. You see those guys in that restaurant? The reason that they've got those juicy steaks, they've been stealing from you. They're in possession of your stuff. They are holding stolen goods. But here's the good news. You don't have to organize a revolution, a revolt of the proletariat. You just have to vote for me. You have to empower me. I and my friends will go in there and take their stuff. And we will give some of it to you. So I think you begin to see here the contours of American politics in its current shape. Bill and Hillary Clinton, at the end of the day, are not ideologues. They're a lot more like Bonnie and Clyde. If you want to get an understanding of them, crack open the pages of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. You will come across two scam artists called the Duke and the Dauphin. These are people who essentially pull scams on the gullible. And the Clintons have been running rackets since the Arkansas days. I mean, just think about the last 6 months of the Bill Clinton White House. They were doing basically three things. Number one, renting out the Lincoln bedroom for cash. Number two, going through the White House and the Oval Office with aides, essentially looting stuff out of the cabinets, taking paintings, Norman Rockwell's off the walls, having them shipped off to Chappaqua. The Secret Service had to go get some of that stuff back. And selling pardons to big-time racketeers, tax cheats, and felons. They actually put out the word, this was, I admit, before my time, I couldn't put in, if you want to have your conviction overturned, how much are you willing to pay? This is what they're actually doing. And if you say, well, gee, but that was Bill, let's fast forward to Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. Now, Hillary said she was dead broke when she left the White House, and because of her legal bills due to Watergate, due to their own stuff, not Watergate, but Whitewater, and then the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and the Paula Jones $800,000 payout, yes, they had bills. And they work, if you added up their net worth and their legal bills, they were dead broke. Now, how do you go from dead broke to $300 million on a government salary? The Clintons also didn't invent the iPhone. They didn't start a business. So it's worth asking, what product were they selling in order to make all this cash? And the unavoidable answer is they were selling American foreign policy. That was the product. Access to it. And this is all very significant because whatever you think about what Trump said as a private citizen on a bus 10 years ago, these are crimes against the public trust. These are crimes actually against us by the Clintons. People say, well, Bill made a lot of money on his speeches. Well, Bill's speaking fee from the year 2000 onwards was $150,000. That's basically in line with what ex-presidents make. But when Hillary became Secretary of State, his speaking fee magically quadrupled to in the range of $500,000 to $750,000. This is to give a 20 to 30-minute speech, the same old rubbish. Obviously, people aren't paying for a speech. The Bill Clinton speaking fee is a bribe. It's a down payment on what somebody, and very often the somebody isn't an American, it's not even Goldman Sachs, it's the government of Qatar, it's the government of India, it's a group of foreigners or foreign entities that want something out of Hillary. And so they invite Bill to speak. And that's step one. And here's step two. Hillary then does what the donor wants. In this case, it could be something like a bunch of Indian billionaires who want Hillary, who has been opposed to the Indian nuclear deal, to now come out for it. And so she does, as in fact she did. And then, step three, millions of dollars now flow to the Clinton Foundation. Step one, step two, step three. It happens again, and again. I can give you 10 examples off the top of my head. And the Clintons admit it. They admit step one, they admit step two, they admit step three. They merely deny that steps 1 and 3 had anything to do with 2. We took the money, we did the deed, we took more money, but our taking of the money had nothing to do with the deed. Now, this is a very bad situation. And the reason that it isn't, the reason that this hasn't, so to speak, hit the fan is because of the unbelievable collusion and complicity of the national media. Now, the national media has always been biased, oriented to the left, but hey, it's in a new dimension now. I mean, every time I turn on the TV, I see these sick, pathetic, sorry characters. And what are they doing? They are huffing and puffing to drag this crooked hag across the finish line. Yep. Now, Hillary's America, unfortunately, is an America that is more gangsterized than anything that we've seen before. We've never had a Secretary of State offering American policy to the highest bidder. We never have. It's a new low in American politics. And the reason that this election is so difficult for Trump is because the left has 3 secret weapons: academia, Hollywood, and the media. They're the 3 biggest megaphones of our culture. And in fact, all of this distorted history that we're correcting in our movie is just full of astounding claims, and the reason that they have shock value is because the left has been putting out so much disinformation. And when you have these 3 megaphones, you can do it. And no one can contradict you. Even if you knew that what they're saying isn't true, you don't have a big enough megaphone to contradict it. That's how they get away with it. So it's a great failure of conservatives and Republicans to have allowed this to happen. Now look, I have much more I want to say, but I've got to adopt the motto that King Henry VIII used with one of his wives. He said, "I can't keep you too long." And so I'm going to just say one more thing and then subside and be happy to take some questions and then sign some books. Now, I want to say a word about Trump, and I want to say a word about this never Trump business, and I want to say a word about morality and principles, because there are people, many of us and our friends, who feel Trump is as bad as Hillary, and that you don't like Hillary, but you can't vote for Trump. And why can't you vote for Trump? Because you are a decent, principled conservative. And to preserve your dignity and to preserve your principles, you're going to vote for some other guy, or you're not going to vote at all. This is a real phenomenon in the Republican Party. Now, let's think about this for a minute, because I remember when I first joined the Reagan White House years ago, and when I was introduced to the world of foreign policy, I thought to myself, great, this is going to be a contest between the good guys and the bad guys, and isn't it going to feel fantastic to be on the side of the good guys? But the moment I began to look at the world, I realized, no. Most of the time, it isn't even like that. Most of the time in the world, we're choosing between the bad guy and the really bad guy. And the question then becomes, a moral conundrum, admittedly, is it admissible to ally with the bad guy to get rid of the worst guy? Remember, we did this in World War II. We allied with Stalin, a really bad guy, because another bad guy, Hitler, posed a greater threat at the time. It's then that I began to learn that in politics, morality isn't just about intentions. Intentions or principles have got to be combined with an awareness of the consequences of those principles. Now, the consequence of never Trump, the consequence of any Christian or conservative standing on principle, is going to be the election of Hillary, who will do her best to decimate your principles. That is the unavoidable result of this form of thinking. The people who stand on principle today are kind of like the abolitionists of the 19th century who opposed slavery, and in fact were kind of moral beings because they were the only ones who wanted to end slavery now. But very interestingly, the abolitionists were politically completely ineffective. The abolitionists, contrary to what many people think, did not end slavery, nor could they. Mostly their meetings were occupied with things like burning the American Constitution, because they blamed the founders for allowing slavery in the first place. So who ended slavery if not the abolitionists? The answer? Slavery was ended by the Republican Party when it won the election of 1860. The Republican Party did it. And so the way for the abolitionist principles to be actualized in American history was to support an actual political party that had the ability to carry the election and then to win the war. And so it is today. American politics is fought in teams. If you want to stop Hillary and the Democrats, there is only one way to do that, and that's to vote for Trump and the Republicans. In my opinion, there is no moral equivalence. I'll end with those words from the 1960s. This is a critical time. The American dream hangs in the balance. This is not a time for infighting. It's not a time for pettiness. It's a time to think of what America has done for us and what we need to do for her. If not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dinesh, the first one is, one of our guests would like to where can they go to read about the Democrats and slavery and the rest of the info about them? Is there a place outside of your movie, of course?
The question is, you know, all this stuff I've been saying about the Democratic Party, where can I find out more about it? And the answer is right here. A movie is one thing, and a movie is an emotional medium. So in the movie, we try to recreate episodes of American history to show it to you. But the book, Hillary's America, is kind of the underpinning of the movie and has sort of chapter and verse on all of it. So it's not just that you believe the book, but the book is full of scholarly references and citations so that if you're an attentive reader, you can begin with the book Hillary's America. I see we have a few copies left. And then go on to the sources that are actually mentioned in the book to learn more. But by the way, I should say one thing about history is none of the history that I recite is dubious or controversial in any way. And in fact, I put out claims that are very easy to refute if anyone can refute them. For example, I say in the movie, the line, in 1860, the year of the Civil War, no Republican owned a slave. Period. Now, somebody can easily refute that by saying, here are 5 Republicans and they own slaves. But in the whole public debate over the movie and the book, no one's been able to name even one case. So the claims in this movie and book, even though subjected to withering attack, have not even been seriously disputed, let alone refuted. So you can feel very secure in believing every fact in both the book and in the movie. But that's a good place to start.
Okay. Thank you. This is a very open-ended question, but you hit it on a little bit. Someone in the crowd had noticed that a lot of us conservatives, and he includes himself, are gray-haired as we look out in the crowd tonight, and that the younger voters and younger people are voting Democrat. And you touched on this, that progressives have the 3 big trifecta. They have education and Hollywood and the media. What can we do? Again, just a couple of minutes because we have lots of questions.
In the short term, we need to dispatch conservative missionaries to the university who can present the conservative message in an appealing way. It's not that young people reject conservatism. Quite honestly, they don't know what it is. They don't know what we're trying to conserve. And so when I was a freshman at Dartmouth, there was an older generation of classical liberals who were fair-minded and moderated the radicalism of the 1960s, but that generation has now retired. And so our message is just not being heard, and in some cases it is being shouted out. I speak a lot on the campus. It's kind of my specialty, but to do it, you have to be kind of thick-skinned and have a little bit of a taste for controversy, which I do. And so getting out on the campus is very important if we're not going to lose the younger generation.
This is sort of a human interest one. I think it's interesting. Did you make any friends in prison, and do you still communicate with them?
You know, number one, I don't communicate with any of them because it's a paradox of prison life that you are face to face with these guys all the time for a certain period, and then you are prohibited from maintaining any contact with them subsequently. I guess because they feel that if you maintain contact, most of us would get together, plan to rob banks, and do stuff like that. So no, that's a chapter of my life, and I've actually moved on. I wouldn't say I made friends in prison, but I would say that in the confinement center there were very interesting characters. And I got to know them, and I got to see a side of American life that I otherwise never would have. So I actually don't regret it. I think it actually has helped widen my understanding and my education.
Thank you. What exactly would the media gain with a Hillary win? And why are they pushing so hard?
Yeah. Academia and the media are part of the sector that doesn't produce things so much as they produce words. The community organizers, the journalists, the Hollywood types, this is the knowledge industry. And the way they see themselves, they believe that they are far and away the smartest people in society. And they feel that in a really just society, it would be organized and planned in such a way that the smartest people, just like in Plato's Republic, would be making all the decisions. And so they're just waiting for that realization of true justice in which all power in the country is turned over to them. So the media feels that in a Hillary administration, they would be valued. And the professors would become part of the brain trust of that. So it's not even that they're looking for money, but what they're looking for is status, they're looking for power, and they're looking for influence. And they believe that in an entrepreneurial culture, the entrepreneurs get undue rewards. It's not to say that professors make less money, but you've got, let's say, a professor at San Jose State, and he's making $150,000 or $200,000 a year, but he's really mad that some vulgar Rotarian with a gold chain on his chest is making $2 million selling term life insurance. He cannot understand how a world can be just that permits that. And he would like to see society reorganized. Okay?
Here we need some help here. This one specific guest says, how do we defend ourselves from being called racist, sexist, and homophobes? Is there a simple answer for that? This is from a kid.
The most effective way to counter that is to actually take the whole blame of that and put it on the Democratic Party. Because for years, conservatives have defended against these charges by essentially an apologetic that pleads not guilty. But even if you plead not guilty, you're on the defensive. It energizes your opponent to keep you up against the wall. But the moment you say, these aren't crimes that America did, these are crimes that you did, and we're calling upon you to take responsibility, and if you believe in reparations, you pay the reparations because you did the crimes. This is the way to put the onus where it really belongs. And as Richard Nixon said, this argument has the added merit of being true.
Looking into the future, someone wants to know, what is the topic of your next movie? If you'd like to share that. Exclusive forum right now, tonight, you're hearing it.
So we have a little film team, we're about 10 of us, and we think it's important to actually put our toe in the water of trying our hand in feature films. And the reason for this is that the big guys in Hollywood is not Michael Moore, it's Steven Spielberg. And the most powerful messages of the left are not made in documentary films, they're made in romantic comedies, in thrillers, in horror films, in animated family movies. So long term, if we want to plant a conservative flag in Hollywood, we have to do those movies too.
That sounds good. Sounds great. Perhaps you don't have an opinion on this one, but a questioner wants to know, what is Huma Abedin's influence on or usefulness to Hillary?
I don't know the answer to that. There's a kind of very strange parallelism between Uma and her wiener husband and Hillary and Bill. One would think on the surface of it that Wiener and Bill would have a lot more in common than Uma and Hillary. But I just think of these as two very strange amoebas that somehow have come together in a relationship that defies any decent description.
It is definitely very odd. This is one that's close to my heart, and I'm still annoyed by it. We were told by everyone, even conservatives, that Jim Comey was pristine. What do you make of our FBI director?
Well, the lesson I draw from this is it's very bad habit that we have on our side to place our hopes in things that are never going to happen, that are outside our control. This goes on all the time. Hillary has Parkinson's disease. We're waiting for James Comey to do his thing, and then it's all going to be over for Hillary. We're trying to find Obama's birth certificate. It's the reliance on the Hail Mary pass that never happens. And it is never going to happen because, you know, I don't know the story of Comey, but the way I envision it is that his mom recognized from a very young age that little James would always put ambition ahead of doing the right thing. And when Comey weighed the odds, he said, oh, I can propose indictment, but will they actually indict Loretta Lynch, Obama? No. I'm just going to make a deadly enemy of a very powerful man, the President of the United States. Dinesh tried that. Look what happened to him. So, time to be a good little boy and play along with the Clinton team, and that's what he decided to do. Very sad and shameful, but I think we expected far too much of little James.
Yeah. Agreed. This is related to that, good segue. Are Hillary's actions impeachable when she might be president?
Well, you know, in politics at that level, the best juridical bar is definitely the ballot box. I mean, the FBI won't indict Hillary, but we can. We can. And the American people can. So that's probably the best remedy at this point. I mean, has she committed crimes? Yes. These people, like I say, have been ultimately putting American policy itself up for sale. It's a horrendous thing that they've done. But at this point, they have escaped accountability. And it's because of their powerful allies, including Obama.
Right. Okay, so this sort of changed gears a little bit. Since social conservatism is losing popularity among the young, should the GOP compromise on some social issues in order to attract the next generation of voters and make it competitive in future elections?
Good question.
As a kid.
I think the issue with young people is not that they're, quote, rejecting social conservatism, but that they don't respond to the social conservative mantras of the 1980s. And if this seems weird, they don't respond to the Cold War mantras of the 1980s either, because all of that is ancient history to them. And so I believe that there is a very powerful social conservatism that can be argued in front of young people. It's just going to sound different than it did 30 years ago. Young people, for example, today are far more pro-life than they were in the 80s. But the language of pro-life needs to be somewhat different in order to resonate. So part of, I think, our problem is that we have fossilized our arguments from the Reagan era. And we don't think of creative new ways and creative new technologies to help get our message out in the way that we should.
Thank you. This next question is really chilling. Will conservative groups like this one be in danger if Hillary is elected? And just as on a personal note, I am so glad that the few people in this valley had the forethought to set us up in 2004, well ahead of the Lois Lerner regime. What will happen to groups like this, in your opinion?
Well, we'll have to see, but you know, let me say this, that we live in a society and under a form of government in which the majority has power, but it doesn't have power to trespass on the rights of the minority. During the Civil War debate of the 1860s, Abraham Lincoln, who was completely opposed to secession, because he believed that you can't secede just because you lost an election. But if you read his annual message in 1861, he actually, in that speech, says something very significant. He says, but if the majority were to actually abridge the rights of the minority, any of them, he goes, then you would have every right to secede. You have no allegiance to a government that is actually violating your fundamental rights. But Lincoln said, have I actually taken away your First Amendment right, or your Second Amendment right, or your Fourth Amendment right? I haven't. And so his argument against secession was that you can't have democracy if the losers get to quit without playing the game. But as I say, Lincoln acknowledged, as the founders did, that there is such a thing as tyranny of the majority. And if the majority does trespass on our constitutional rights, then we have to consider what remedies are available to us, which will be a topic for another day.
Very good. And we know you're not a California resident, but do you have any words? What would you say to those of us who feel here there's no point in voting in California because our vote doesn't count?
Then you should buy DVDs of the movie Hillary's America and send them to swing voters in Florida and Ohio and Nevada. In other words, use your power in laser-like fashion to reach the people who are actually going to make a difference in the election.
I think that's great advice. That's my personal view. Okay, we'll just take a few more questions. We're going to cut it a little short tonight because I see a line going out to Sterling Road, and I know people want to get their book signed. So, just a few.
Miss, are those all the books you have left? Right there? Okay. All right, just letting you know there are just a few left, so if you want to get them, do so. Go ahead.
This is very timely. What's your take on Kennedy's attempt to declassify the emails that just got popped up yesterday or the day before?
Well, this is a really good example about what these dudes in the confinement center were talking about, which is to say you basically have the State Department telling the FBI, we'll facilitate the things that you want if you will reclassify emails to protect Hillary. This is a blatant example of the kind of disgraceful abuse of power that we're seeing at the highest levels of the government. It is a great black mark on the Republican House and Congress that this stuff has been going on for years. And these dudes haven't done much about it. And many of them now are horrified by Trump, but guess who created Trump? You did. You did.
Okay, we'll call that a night. Thank you so much. Please, a nice welcome for
Thanks,
Dinesh
everybody.
D'Souza. See you next
Thank
month
you.
and December as well.
That was really fun.